Most physicians are great at making money, but terrible at growing it. You can work 60-hour weeks while your savings sit in accounts earning basically nothing. NURP changes this. It's algorithmic trading designed specifically for busy professionals who don't have time to watch markets. AI-powered strategies that work while you're seeing patients. No day trading, no guesswork, just systematic wealth building designed for people with demanding careers. Built for physicians who want their money working as hard as they do. Check out start.nurp.com/doctors. That's start.nurp.com/doctors to learn more. NURP is a paid sponsor of this episode. All trading carries risk and results vary, so do your own research. This is not financial advice. While my medical school classmates were busy doing bench research between their first and second years of medical school, I decided to spend the last summer vacation of my life shadowing in the hospital, not doctors, but chaplains. My mentor that summer, Rabbi Larry Heimer, kicked off the summer the way any good rabbi would, by giving me lots of reading material. One book in particular still frames my whole practice of medicine, Rabbi Joseph Ozerovsky's To Walk in God's Ways. In it, Rabbi Ozerovsky describes the practice of Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, as he practices it in his role as a hospital chaplain. One story in the book made the difference. He relates a story from the Talmud, Tractate Nedarim 40a, in which a student of the great Rabbi Akiva falls ill and none of the other students go to visit him. Finally, the rabbi himself visits the student, opens his curtains, and washes his floor. The student responds by saying, "Rabbi, you have revived me." What I've taken to heart from that story is that we never know what will heal a person. There's so many needs a person has during an illness, and the 30 minutes in my office are often the least impactful thing anyone does for that person. If the other needs are not met, my treatment won't work. Rabbi Akiva's student gets better for two reasons: the very presence of another human being coming to be with him, and the fact that someone attends to the needs that have fallen into neglect because of his sickness. If, in addition to my medical knowledge, I can provide some of that presence or relieve one of those daily needs, I'm a better healer for that. Today on Healing People, Not Patients, we'll be hearing from Dr. Nina Butler, who has made Bikur Cholim the latest chapter in her life's work. My hope is that she can teach all of us how to do a little Rabbi Akiva-style healing, even us medical professionals who thought we were the experts. Stay tuned after the break.
No room for the soul that's in my head. No room for the soul that's in my heart.
When someone's sick, they're not just dealing with annoying symptoms. They're confronting some of life's biggest questions. I'm Dr. Jonathan Weinkle, and you're listening to Healing People, Not Patients. Join us as we explore how to make our practice about complete healing, healing of the body and the spirit. Welcome everybody back. This is Dr. Nina Butler. I know Nina in more context than I can count, but on one foot, she is a holder of two different doctorates, one in special education and one educational administration and education policy, a former school principal, a veteran in the nonprofit world, where, as she said, she went from asking for money to giving money away, and currently is devoting her energies to the Bikur Cholim group, which is a Pittsburgh group that is dedicated to the obligation to visit the sick. But as we'll talk about, this is not just a matter of dropping by the hospital making small talk, or even worse, haranguing somebody about all the details of the medical care that they've received. This is a much deeper obligation. And you've got this whole network of people held together by WhatsApp, not a paid sponsor, although I wouldn't object if they wanted to become one. And you're doing things that go way beyond that initial visit that I talked about a second ago. So I'm curious to know how you got to this place, how you built this organization into what it is, what I know it to be today.
Sure. Thank you for asking me, inviting me to be part of this podcast. Really exciting what you're doing. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. So I married into a remarkable family.
You sure did.
My husband, the Butler family, has been here now. Our grandkids are the 5th generation living in the same property, actually. So Aunt Hansi and Uncle Donald, the patriarch and matriarchs of this property with my in-laws, were taking in patients when we first got married. At that point, Dr. Thomas Starzl was experimenting and then perfecting liver transplant. So people were coming from all over the country and really all over the world for liver transplant. And Hansi and Donald just naturally invited them into their homes to stay, some of them for weeks, some of them for months. So I saw Bikur Cholim modeled in a way that touched my heart quite deeply. When we ended up spending a lot of time in hospitals, our eldest son had cystic fibrosis and eventually got a double lung transplant, and the new lungs gave him cancer. So he actually passed away from cancer. But after spending 2 decades in hospitals, he was a frequent flyer, they called him. He spent a lot of time there. I really wanted to do something constructive with feelings that were really debilitating. So turning it around to become something constructive where I could do good for other people was really a blessing and not a burden at all.
I have to break in because I think my first real memory of your family as an adult was being on the list of Mikey's emails that were coming out while he was still alive and in the hospital, and the joy and positivity that he brought, even as he was going through this. And I know he lost hearing from some of the medications that he had to take, and just such an inspiration during my first couple of years of med school. So the idea of learning from a patient and being inspired by them instead of the other way around really kind of started for me with him.
Oh, kind of you to say. Mikey always said that he was a kid who had cystic fibrosis. Fibrosis didn't have him.
Right.
And he lived his life day by glorious day. And he said that so much and so often that it's actually on his tombstone. So it really is some lesson that we take with us forward, is quoted back to us by people who remember him. So being able, for example, to look a parent in the eye and from my heart, having been there, and say, oh, your child's in the ICU, your child's going to get so much attention. It's twisting the
right.
But yeah, there are some positives to being in an ICU, but only someone who's sat there before can say it in a way that creates a closeness and a comfort rather than just sounding totally strange.
Right.
It's just a little bit strange. But knowing my way around hospitals and not being intimidated by any of the medical situations that they're going to throw at me is something that I've been able to pay forward. And that's really what this is. It's in one way paying forward a lot of people who, I like to say, they were typical people who acted in extraordinary ways. And now I'm just the ringleader, bringing together people in our community who were typical people acting in extraordinary ways. So our organization started very much as a grassroots effort, and I formalized it now to be a 501c3. And we now have a few hundred volunteers who are helping patients who travel here from across the country and across the world, or just from a block or two away. We're happy to help patients and their families with anything but what you do, what the doctors do. We handle everything around that.
Although there is some overlap, but so talk about what some of those extraordinary ways are.
Sure. I guess where it starts with people who are coming from out of town, especially people coming from out of the country, in many cases don't speak a word of English and have never been out of their home country, is with a Zoom call. And I asked for the call to be on Zoom, even for people who don't have the internet. So you find someone who does, and we have to meet this way. I start the conversation with everyone who's coming to Pittsburgh has to be on this one call. I'm happy to deal with whoever you want to designate after this one call. But for our intake conversation, everybody who's coming has to be on one call because it's really too much of a responsibility for any one person to tell over what we discussed to the next person. And I start saying, I want you to list off all the questions you have about this trip and coming here. I'm going to list them. I'm going to read them back to you to make sure I have the whole list. And then I'm going to talk for a while. And by the end of the discussion part, hopefully I will have answered all your questions. And time again, even in wonderful, beautiful marriages that are so close, if you ask one spouse for their list of questions, the other one has different questions.
You forgot to ask about
Exactly.
I can absolutely hear that happening.
So that Zoom call where their questions are answered and I give them a realistic view of what our organization can do to support them just makes such a difference. And I hear this from patients every single time that this changed the experience because they were walking in with terror and now they felt like they had family here. That's part of the goal.
So I should say, it seems so obvious to the two of us, but for the audience, a lot of them may be from outside the Jewish community, that for a lot of people coming in who are more observant Jewishly, finding a place where they feel comfortable to stay, eat, to spend Shabbat, to have, especially if they're here over a holiday, those spiritual needs. Matt, one of the things about illness that I talk about is how much that it uproots somebody and kind of entraps them in this narrow place where they can't be who they want to be. And you're really providing them a moment to take a breath and expand back into themselves and into the person they want to be. But
it's interesting. You know that there's now data that supports that if you address spiritual needs, it improves patient outcomes.
Oh yeah. Why I interview so many chaplains on this podcast.
Oh, well, hey, yeah, that's really exciting that it's not just a hunch we have. Actually, it's hard data. So we don't just handle spiritual needs. Very often the people who are coming, even people who are coming from the country of Israel, might not be religious at all. So for people who are observant, they, of course, have issues with their food and with their observance. But for the totally irreligious, when I offer them, okay, so you don't need our help with food, you'll eat anywhere, but would you like a home-cooked meal at least for Friday night? They all say, oh my goodness, that would be priceless.
Because hospital food is terrible.
Oh, I thought it was because they liked the warm hug we were giving them.
No,
nothing to do with the food. It's interesting that as a policy, Bikur Cholim does not provide food for the hospitalized patient because their healthcare insurance is paying good money for that food. And if I were to provide their food, then the hospital could turn around and say, we don't really need to provide kosher food. Someone in the community is doing it. So I will provide for everyone else in the family, but for that patient. Also, in that phone call, one reason I ask for it to be on Zoom is because I like to show them the way that I organize volunteers. And that's something that other people who are watching this podcast might want to be in touch because it might help them in their organizations. And I'm using a free website that we've retrofitted for our needs, but I'm so happy to share it with anyone who organizes volunteers for any reason.
And this is the Lots of Helping Hands website.
Lots of Helping Hands, which was originally created for patients with cancer, but we've been using it for decades now. I think we're their biggest user. So it takes a lot of words to describe it, but I can just show it to the patients in real time and they can see automatically what it is. So even patients who are very apprehensive about the internet and do not want any social presence will allow me to organize our volunteers that way, which really helps because we're able to be very specific about what their needs are, right down to white meat or dark meat chicken, and they don't like raw onions, and one of them is gluten-free and one of them is vegetarian, whatever it is. We can put every nuance about their diet down. It's not meal train. It's kind of meal train on speed because I can request anything we need this way. So we actually do use WhatsApp groups But we also, of course, have listservs and have email addresses because we also have people who don't necessarily sign into WhatsApp.
And so some of the things that I've seen with this is, people are going grocery shopping for someone who maybe just had a surgery and they're thinking clearly and they might be able to do a little bit of light cooking in the house, but getting to the store and bringing the groceries to the car and all of those sorts of things is a bridge too far for the first couple of weeks.
But what we actually do for that, which I really like, and again, there's a learning curve. This came after years and years of experience. For local people, we serve them a little differently than for the out-of-towners. So for the local people, their problem is that all their friends and neighbors are saying, if there's anything you need, please stay in touch. And all of them want to send flowers and fruit basket. Not helpful. The first one is, but not the second fruit basket and the third. Or if someone brings soup and the next person brings soup and the next person brings soup and they get nothing, So just coordinating it. So the people who love and care about them are actually doing something that's constructive. We do organize those meals so they're what the patient wants, when they want it delivered, right down to the nuance of how it's packed. We actually did this for one of the rabbis affected from the Trail X shooting right afterward. And again, so many people wanted to help. So being able to organize it. And when we delivered to him, he wanted it dropped off in a box outside his front door. We can do that. We can do whatever they need. For local people, I've come around to this thing I've called Person of the Day. So I want to tell you about Person of the Day because it's something that evolves over time because there's a learning curve and we're learning from patients and people who are supporting them how we can better be supportive. Person of the Day is something we totally made up. But it's a person who calls the patient the night before or that morning, and they are there to help for the silly things that a patient might not want to ask anybody else to do. But they know this person volunteered to be their helper for something small, something big. It could be giving the person a ride to therapy, but it can also be returning their library books or picking up cleaning or going shopping at a store that doesn't deliver. It has a wide time frame, even though I write in the notes that it could be a 5-minute task or it could be a 2-hour task, usually not more than that. But it's become a real comfort to people because sometimes what they want more than anything is for someone just to come over and be there for them or someone to be there when they take a shower. So there's someone answering the phone and they're present in case the person wants to feel secure in case they fall. If there's someone right outside the door who can run in and help them. But they're not going to hire a nurse for that. And the spouse might be working or for some reason not there. So it's really whatever that patient needs. And we've been told, again, that this is something that means more than the meal sometimes. The meals, on the other hand, are such a warm hug. There are Bikur Cholim organizations across the country and across the world. And if you're going somewhere that you have no idea what you're going to do in that place, you can look up that term. That's why we kept the words Bikur Cholim in our name, but our other name is Friends of Jewish Patients in English. I do a lot of advocacy in this organization with non-Jewish administrators of hospitals. And Friends of Jewish Patients is something they understand and they can say. They can't necessarily say Bikur Cholim, they don't understand.
Right.
But advocacy and education is a big part of what we do. So among the things the organization does is the pre-visit to answer those questions, get them feeling a little more comfortable coming to town. We help with accommodations in that phone call, explain the benefits of staying right near the hospital versus staying in the Jewish community. And I say, these are two options, but you can't do both at the same time. You have to choose one or the other and tell them about Family House. I'm a person who's really disappointed that they bought and refurbished one place instead of having 3 smaller places because it served us better when they were in other hospitals. We do hospital visit. We provide kosher food if they need. We have Shabbos cabinets. We have cabinets in several of the local hospitals, which are just if a family finds themselves in the hospital too close to Shabbat to run home and get what they want. They know there's a cabinet of emergency supplies there. So a children's hospital includes even non-electronic toys. And you have no idea how hard that is to find in a hospital. And it has
or anywhere these days.
Yeah, candles and
we used to look
pictures.
for those for regular weekdays because we forbid my in-laws to get things that had buttons on them that said, try me, push me,
Yeah,
hear what I can do. No,
Yeah.
we don't want to hear anything.
yeah. We have different kinds of things in the different hospitals. And this advocacy and education comes in very handy because the hospitals really do want to care about the cultural needs of different groups, but they need some basic training. So even if they provide, as UPMC does, UPMC has kosher food you can order, but they don't totally get yet that on a meat tray, they can't put yogurt and cream for the coffee. So it's a small thing, but it makes a big difference to a patient who might come from a Hasidic community that how could they do this? They have to come take a breath. The tray's still kosher. To eat that,
Right.
when I try to explain the Hasidic people to the hospital, it's really helpful that we're in Pennsylvania where there are Amish people because they understand Amish. And so these are kind of like Jews who are kind of like that. Yeah.
And I mean, you know, from other conversations that we've had that I'm working with people from a huge variety of different traditional communities from South Asia and from East Asia and from Africa and from the Middle East. And so there are dozens of other flavors of exactly what you talked about. And folks are maybe living here, but going into the hospital in a very foreign environment.
Absolutely. Can I just follow up on that for
Sure.
a moment?
Yeah,
At
absolutely.
Children's Hospital, we actually applied for a grant to be able to beef up the ritual supplies and the Shabbat cabinet there. And the Steel Tree Foundation was very generous in granting us that money. So we started to meet with hospital administrators about how to spend the money and to fulfill what we had actually proposed. And we ended up meeting monthly and with heads of departments at Children's and with the chief medical officer. I mean, we're meeting with important people. And after meeting for several months, one of the people said, well, this would help the Muslim community too, because they're having trouble with halal food.
Yeah.
And we probably need to be doing more for them. So now for a year, the Jews and the Muslim community have been meeting together peacefully. We could be an example for Mideast peace with hospital administrators because their efforts to support us.
Inshallah.
Yeah, what can I tell you? Their efforts to support us and improve the kosher standards and availability and our support of their halal dietary needs, we just benefit one another and we understand one another. Now, at Children, it's going to be actualized in an experiment that's going to be very rare across the country. And that's the Shabbat room is not going to be just a Shabbat room. It's going to be a room to accommodate Muslims also who like to pray in a supine manner. They need a full space that the chapel doesn't have for them. I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, but I'm willing to try anything. That's kind of the road we're going down at Children, which is different than the road we're going down at the new Presbyterian Tower, where we have a full Shabbat room in the blueprint that's part of the plans and is really incredible. We're so excited about it.
Right. You mentioned that was being actually designed into the hospital.
It is. And I'm so excited. I actually asked them about it. Is there a certain number of patients or number of users you want to see in order for you to feel that this is a worthwhile investment? And they said something so shocking to me. I was told, no, it's not about numbers. It's now, when constructing new hospital, considered to be best practices. Thank God.
Because you never know who's going to walk in the door. And you don't want to find out after the fact that you didn't serve. So I can understand why it is that way. I'm really relieved to hear that it is actually that way and that it's not something that should be, but is. I had a very short second question I'm going to skip over because we're still on the first one.
Oh, sorry.
But I wanted to come back to the subject that we've started to dip our toe in because we've heard so much over recent years. Vivek Murthy, when he was Surgeon General the first time around, had his campaign against loneliness. We've been hearing about people during pandemic time and the terrible isolation that they suffered. And this Harvard longevity study that points to relationships and social connections as one of the real elements of the glue that holds people's lives together and keeps them rich for a long time. This is pretty critical. And I get the impression that part of the secret sauce of this Bikur Cholim group, not that it's all about food, right? The secret sauce, besides the WhatsApp, is creating those connections both between the people who are volunteering and the patients that they're serving, and also among the volunteers. So talk a little bit about how you've already started to talk about how you teamed up with the Muslim community in Pittsburgh for the hospital patients, but how transferable is this to other communities that may have some of the social cohesion but don't have this model, or that may be needing that social cohesion and that infrastructure that, as you said, you married into the infrastructure, but how do you build that maybe from the ground up?
It's the most common comment that we hear from doctors, nurses, therapists, and from the patients on either side of our patient is, why doesn't my community have this? I don't know enough about how other communities are organized. Ours was very grassroots. And that's why I tell anyone I can, if you want to try this, if you want to start this, I can help you. Please be in touch. Let me know how I can help your community to start this. But even talking to the people in the pastoral care departments, they say that their communities aren't organized. Other communities, they don't know of another community. Now, at Children's, we actually started with the Muslim community because they had this dietary need, but we're in discussions about expanding to the Indian community and some of the Asians, but they don't have an automatic cohesion like we do, right. I think, because we have needs that are geographic. Mm-hmm. People need to be within a certain area, depending on their level of observance. They need to congregate in a place where they can actually walk to places of worship. And our food requirements are different and stricter, it seems, than some of the other practice.
Yeah. All the same, I do see a value in it, particularly this, not so much the hospital, but really there's an address where you can go and say, I need help with something. And as long as you know one person on that list, one person in the WhatsApp group, it suddenly becomes everybody's problem and everybody's job.
What I would suggest is, if anybody who's watching this podcast is part of a faith community, this could be done in one church. And then other churches might pay attention and say, well, we want it too, because those churches do talk to one another. And the congregants might not go to just one, but might go to two of them, or their kids might go to another one. And it can grow in that grassroots way, the way that we've grown it here. I'm happy to share the websites, how we organize, but it's so easily transferable to other faith groups.
Yeah, that's great. I think just knowing that, well, I have two friends and they have two friends, and we all show up in the same place on Friday or on Sunday. We're all eating in the same restaurant with our families 2 or 3 times a week because that's where the community gathers. Having a list on the board of these are the folks that need something, or whatever it is. With that said, what are the biggest obstacles that you've run into over the life of this organization? The things that get in the way of doing this work?
One is really for your side of the community we have in mind, the doctors, and there's so much turnover in a hospital. Oh my goodness. We have wonderful conversations. We build fabulous structure. We have perfect process. Everyone moves to other hospitals and other studies. So making lasting change is something that's going to continue to evolve, and the job's never done. And that's what I've learned, that it's refreshing to have been able to train one hospital, but I feel like this has to just be an ongoing process forever.
And I am kind of a unicorn for having been in the same job for 18 years.
Yes, definitely a unicorn. Another challenge is listening carefully enough, being sufficiently sensitive. And I'm going to tell you a story that'll illustrate it. I'm sure people will understand right away. This is a local patient, a local woman had cancer, and she just did not want everyone's sorrowful eyes and concern. She wanted to be extremely private. She was actually born in Russia, and part of her makeup was this privacy. She wanted to hold on to so strongly. On the other hand, she was in the hospital and needed to be in the hospital over Rosh Hashanah, over our high holiday, where there's a tradition to hear a shofar being blown, a ram's horn being blown. So she had 2 adult sons, and they said, what are we going to do? She doesn't want anyone to know she's in the hospital. So I told the brothers to do something that's not easy. Go look around her whole floor at the hospital and find one window that opens. Any window that opens, one. And then look out the window at what piece of grass is out from there. And then I went to local guys I knew who were going to be blowing shofar for the high holidays. And I asked, would you be willing to walk 45, 50 minutes each way to McGee Women's Hospital from Squirrel Hill and blow shofar outside on a piece of grass for someone who I can't tell you who she is. You won't see her. She can see you, but you won't see her. You won't know who you're doing it for. I can't tell you how many of them volunteered. And they would be leaving their families right before lunchtime. Their families would have to wait over an hour for them to come back. But they just felt so honored to be able to help someone in this situation. It didn't matter who the person was. It really didn't matter because they wouldn't know who that person was. And that's one of the examples of things.
And hospital security didn't come out and say, hey, head out the racket.
No. I mean,
amazing
it's
story.
Not about meals and it's not about transportation. It's about what does this patient want and need?
Yeah.
How can we help them to fulfill their physical and spiritual need that the hospital isn't handling?
Yeah, that is the essence of patient-centered care, which brings me to the last thing that I really wanted to ask. And the real reason that I invited you is that I wanted you to bring this home, not for other communities, but for me and for my colleagues. You know, I think you may know that I spent the summer between my first and second year of med school with hospital chaplains, with Rabbi Heimer, who I'm sure you know well, and with others in the Pittsburgh community, both Jewish and non-Jewish chaplains. And one of the things that he gifted me was a book that I referenced in my introduction to this episode about the concept of Bikur Cholim from a chaplain, from Rabbi Azarovsky, and who I think was at the time in Minneapolis, now in Chicago. And I wanted to think of my career from that point as each visit being kind of like a Bikur Cholim, even though people are visiting me and not the other way around, that you start with that connection, that creation of a shared space first, and then the medical science comes. I think it makes the medicine more potent. My guest last week was talking about how letting somebody get their lament out in the open, getting their shrine and their weeping out in the open would then allow them to heal better. And I think creating this kind of a connection is the same thing. So what are some sort of concrete things that, whether it's things that you experienced when Mikey was sick or what things that you've experienced as you've been doing this work, that a healing professional can do, a doctor, a nurse, pharmacist, anybody, to create that kind of sense that they are visiting with somebody and being present for them before they start saying, well, you need to take this medicine 3 times a day, or we're going to cut here and take this thing out. Before they get to that, what are some things you can do?
What a great question. Wow. Creating that trusted bond is so important. And language is so important. It's remarkable to me that even the admission and discharge directions have not been translated into other languages. How can someone sign a paper and say they understand what they should do when they leave the hospital? They don't understand the pages and pages they've just been handed.
So I will say that is getting better, because my patients who speak other languages do bring me discharge instructions that I can't read. So it is improving.
I hope so.
Most of the time it does look like the language that they speak. I can't vouch for it being 100%.
Well, there's a wonderful thing that just started a couple months ago, and that's through dietary. There's a link to be able to order your food on your phone. You need to get that link from the dietary department, and even the nurses don't know that. And a lot of people in dietary don't know this. But when it's on the phone, it will translate into whatever language is on the phone.
Because your browser isn't able to do that.
Yeah.
It is able
So
to say, oh,
there's
this,
so many
would you
little
like me to
things like that. I think it's really important for doctors to care. And that involves conversation. So our end of life practices, our priorities and values really play into their care. And a conversation is just so important. I've heard from the pastoral care department that their job has gotten so much harder because they used to be able to walk down the halls, visit, and they don't do that so much anymore. They need to see that someone on their admissions papers is of a certain religion, and people aren't writing what religion they're a part of anymore. Some people, I mean, there's more atheists and non-believers than ever, but for Jews at least, they've gotten really afraid to write that they're Jewish on anything. Anti-Semitism is a real thing.
I don't know if that's come out in the conversations with your Muslim patients as well, but I know that a lot
Right.
of
That's right.
hesitant about sharing that.
Everyone's a little afraid of that. So being open to a conversation and partnerships, it seems like medicine was really at the forefront of understanding that a team can accomplish more than any one, and collaboration's a good thing. On the other hand, the doctors really don't understand that a patient coming in for the kinds of surgeries that our out of towners are coming in for are here for up to a week before surgery. They're in the hospital for 3 to 5 to maybe 7 days. And then they're asked to stay in town for a month, maybe more afterward. So I'm taking care of that patient from the week before to the months afterwards. They've got the patient for 5, 6 days. Don't you think we should work together maybe? It wouldn't be so hard. And it will improve the patient care. So being open to it doesn't have to be with the doctor themselves. It can be with the social worker on the team. It can be with someone else on the team. Just that they understand that working together can only improve their care. And it's just so confusing to so many patients that they see a different doctor every day, or that the surgeon who they love, they met before surgery and, oh, this was a great surgeon. Then they have the surgery and they never see that person again. They feel abandoned. But I thought we had something going here. Why do they keep sending strangers into my room to check on me?
And in the teaching hospital, sometimes it's strange. Like, this person who's taking care of me doesn't look old enough to drive.
Right.
And I know that can be disconcerting. So
I don't know why there isn't some kind of visual page of these are the people on our team and these are their credentials that they hand the patient so they could be told. You're meeting with the surgeon. The surgeon has so many people they have to operate on that you might not see the surgeon afterwards. All these other people are really well trained and they're part of the same team, and we're still talking because they are not getting that message. And I'm not talking about any one practice. I'm talking about all of them that I am in touch with.
I got to tell you, I had that idea when I was a resident. I also had negative 100 minutes in my week to implement that idea. And so it never happened, but I think it's brilliant. These are the folks that you're being cared for. There were class pictures of all the residents on the wall in the nurses' station. You would walk into the nursery at McGee where all the babies were hanging out together. And there was a picture of the first, second, third, and fourth year OB residents. It wasn't in the room. It wasn't in the patient rooms.
Gosh,
Yeah.
it really should. It's the same thing with nurses. Actually, there was a wonderful practice at Children that has also disappeared, which was for the frequent flyer kids, for the kids who found themselves in the hospital more than one time or 2 times. They got assigned a primary care nurse, a nurse that no matter where they were placed in the hospital, at least one nurse knew their story, knew what they liked, and would be assigned to their case. Our son, primary nurse, is now the head of Children's Hospital.
Wow.
So we're just delighted that she's there and that she's coming from the trenches, that she's a nurse. So exciting to us. So there's a lot of little things like that that have very little to do with medicine and insurance. Seems like so much is driven by insurance these days.
And I think the thing that you said when you were describing how the WhatsApp group works is probably most instructive, which is just realizing that everybody needs something a little different, and asking a totally open-ended question, like, what do you need, is overwhelming to a person. But so is not asking at all and saying, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And it's okay. Do you understand? And there's no room to assimilate that. So I think that some of that sensitivity to this person might want their food delivered in a box. This person might not want food, but they could really use to have you take their books back to the library. This person is going to want you to carefully manage their social media so everybody gets the message, I'm not doing well, leave me alone.
Yes.
And I don't have the energy to post that. So here's my password, go fix this one.
We had a patient who spoke no English, was from another country, and the mother was at that bedside 24/7. And the patient was a young adult, and she was getting more and more nervous. And one thing the doctors do, and actually medical staff in general does sometimes, is they think if they talk louder and slower, now the patient will understand their language. But if I was in China and they spoke louder or slower to me, I would understand Chinese. And that's not help. And she was just surrounded by Chinese. She was surrounded by a language that was unfamiliar to her. We found out that she liked to knit. So I could put out on my WhatsApp group, who has yarn, who has needles, and get that to the mother, which really changed their life. Just calmed her down. I have an Afghan up there. I can show you that. So while she was there.
Amazing.
So we really appreciate what doctors are doing and that miracles take place. I'm so proud that in those phone calls before they come, I can tell those patients in so many instances that we know you're a doctor. We have had other patients and we've seen outcomes that go beyond medicine. They are miracles. You are coming to a great city. You're coming to an excellent city for medical care. You are coming to a superb physician, and you should feel really lucky that you're going to be able to come here. You're going to leave a different person.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I just have this feeling that as this episode spreads, I think people are going to pick up that thread and start to knit their own Afghan warm hug to people. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And as you always sign off, after the group has solved some difficult thing in a wonderful way, ordinary people doing extraordinary things, Tiskila mitzvot, may you merit many more wonderful deeds of kindness and love. So thank you so much for being on.
Jonathan, thank you.
The phrase that will stay with me from Nina's interview is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Anyone with a driver's license can pick someone up at the airport, give them a ride to the hospital. The degree of difficulty is pretty low, even if PennDOT has closed all 3 bridges into your neighborhood and the tunnel that runs under it, and routed the tunnel detour traffic through your main business district. But doing that action for a total stranger at 11 at night or at 3 in the morning, when the person doesn't even share a common language with you, anyone can do it. Not a lot of people do. The act itself might not be extraordinary, but doing it in that circumstance for that person at that time certainly is. The bar to entry into the medical profession is a little higher than getting a driver's license, but there's still plenty of things we do in the course of our day that aren't so hard to do. Making eye contact, offering someone a tissue when they cry, asking after someone's family member who we know they're worrying about. Anyone can do it. But when we're in a hurry, or when we feel uneasy around the particular patient we're with, or when we're so deep in the medical weeds that we forget we're treating a human being, not a disembodied disease, we don't do it. Our medical treatment loses the element of visiting with the sick. Mishnah Peah is a 2nd century collection of laws about the commandment not to harvest the corners of your fields so the poor can take for their needs. It opens by listing things for which, quote, there is no definite measure. One of which is, of course, Peah, this commandment of leaving the corners of the field uncut. The Mishnah then goes on to list some other things for which there is also, quote, no definite measure, meaning there's no maximum or minimum amount of that action you're to do. One of those things is Gmilut Chasadim, deeds of loving kindness. What kind of deeds are these, you may ask? The Italian scholar Rav Ovadia Bartanura, he of the blue bottle of wine, explains, deeds of loving kindness one does with one's body, like Bikur Cholim. There's no limit, but even doing it once is better than nothing. To that one person, it's everything. There's another connection between Peah and Bikur Cholim. Even though there's, quote, no set amount for Peah, eventually someone did standardize it. 1/60th of the total harvest, about 1.67% if you're doing the decimal math. That number shows up a lot in Jewish law, including just before the Rabbi Akiva story I talked about, the cold open. In Talmud Nedarim 39b, in that context, 1/60th is the amount of a person's suffering we take away when they visit them. Before you say, well, then just send 60 people in, the person will be cured. Know that the rabbis of the Talmud already thought of that dodge. Each visitor removes 1/60th of the suffering that still remains after the previous visitor left. Or as my Rav, Michael says, it's like a mathematical limit. You can get close, but you're never going to get all the way there. And only if it's the right sort of visit. What makes someone the right sort of visitor? There's a phenomenon in medicine known as concordance. People build more trust and experience greater healing with a healer who is similar to them in gender or in ethnicity. But in the Nedarim 39b, Rav Ahar Bar Hanina speaks of a different kind of concordance, necessary for effective healing when visiting a sick person, to be, quote, ben gilo. One translation of ben gilo is that this actually means to be of the same astrological sign. But as always, there's other ways to read this. Gil can mean age. One of the same age may be more of a comfort than someone too young or too old. Gil also means joy. One of the same temperament who enjoys the same things can provide greater comfort than someone with whom we have nothing in common. Whether that's music, prayer, or the Pittsburgh Steelers, even a seemingly trivial connection can build a bond. Gil can also be conjugated in the verb legalot, to reveal. If we're vulnerable, broken, and willing to share that vulnerability with the others, we connect in a way that armored stoicism and charmed innocence don't allow. Galui, exposed, what happens when you decide to reveal something about yourself. Doctors are often advised to take after William Osler and exhibit equanimitas. That's from another foreign language, Latin. It means calm, gentle detachment. Osler missed his own son's funeral, so count me out of that. Sharing some humanity, some vulnerability, while taking care not to make the visit about us, can be a superpower. And that exposed vulnerability is our strength, our newfound ability to be there for each other. It allows us, legalot, to discover strength we didn't know we had. I first explored these ideas about Ben Gilo in a talk I gave 1 year after the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, to an audience of my friends and neighbors who had all experienced the tragedy from a vantage point too close for comfort, including some of the survivors. Sometime before that, a patient had chided me that, quote, you doctors all live such perfect lives. Well, I knew even then that it wasn't true. The very process of becoming a healer is often a gauntlet of trauma. I had gone relatively unscathed. No longer. But I was blessed to experience post-traumatic growth and grew into, I think, a Ben Gil for a lot of people who used to see me in that too good to be true light. To return to where we started, perhaps this is the secret sauce of the Bikur Cholim. These are indeed ordinary people, which means all of them have lived lives of both joy and pain, of comfort and of challenge. They know what the people they're helping are experiencing because they've experienced things too. Maybe not the same things, but the larger experience that Reverend Holman talked about in the last episode, the truth that, quote, all of humanity has suffered. Humanity is better when the response to that suffering is to lend a hand to another suffering person. So for my colleagues, remember, there is no fixed amount. Hand a person who isn't moving well their purse and coat as they leave the exam room, or even help them put it on. Put a hand on a shoulder while they cry and shut your mouth for a minute. Escort them to the door and make sure they get what they need at checkout, but don't hover over your office staff. They need to know that you trust them to also be good healers. You are, of course, an extraordinary person. But today, try doing an ordinary thing in an extraordinary way and watch how much better it makes your patient feel. Thanks for spending time with me today. If this conversation sparked something in you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And share it with a colleague who could use a reminder of why we do this work. For more thoughts, explore my blog at www.healerswholisten.com/blog or follow me on Instagram at healerswholisten. For deeper dives, check out the book version of Healing People, Not Patients, or my second book, From Illness to Exodus. Links to both are in the show notes. Our theme song, Room for the Soul, is available on Bandcamp. It's a reminder that together, we can find room for the soul in medicine. This podcast is not medical advice, nor is it legal or financial counsel. It's a space for reflection, rooted in stories, spirituality, and the art of healing. For your own care, always consult the professionals who know you best.